Okay.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, excuse me. Thank you, Chancellor. I think we're all very appreciative both of your time here today and what you're doing for the school children of New York City every day. I certainly am someone who can speak to the fact that your administration has been incredibly responsive, and the people of my district appreciate that. A number of issues, so many issues were raised, but an earlier issue was mayoral control and a one-year continuation versus longer. I'm just curious, since you have an enormous system in New York City with 1 million students, a million plus students, and over 1,000 schools?
1,600.
Way over. Thank you. What would it mean if suddenly, at the literally turn of a dime, we didn't have mayoral control? What would happen to you and these over 1 million children?
Well, a little bit of chaos, I would think. Right now, I think we have the best of all possible worlds. We have mayoral control. And remember, a mayor campaigns on his education belief system. So people choose you because they believe you believe what they believe in. And then by him or she picking a chancellor who's on the same page, there's certain continuity that's just going to, I think, work well for everyone. I think the other thing is that I believe in the law, it goes back to this kind of school board, if not the individual school boards by district, it goes back to like a receivership, which would have gone back to the days of, let's say, Cortines, Fernandez, I can give you all the names, who on a dime might be fired because the mayor wasn't happy about something, because they had no control over their people, so they didn't work out their issues together. To me, what you want in a system, especially if you want to improve a lot of things, you want stability. You want continuity. You want people who speak with one voice. I mean, it's not just the mayor and I, but it's a group now. You have UFT, CSA. We generally, I mean, there's going to be times we disagree on any number of things, but isn't it better for a teacher and a principal to go to work in the morning and say, one of the things I don't have to deal with is all the politics around this, because everybody is on the same page? So that's the best answer I can give you, because honestly, I have been around for all the structures, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and this to me allows us to do things quickly, comprehensively, and still with a lot of community input.
And am I correct in understanding that if this were to happen, even if you're describing, well, we would go back to a pre-system, we don't have that structure. There aren't community school boards, so we would actually have to recreate them and have separate elections.
Absolutely.
There aren't separate superintendents in the old definition of what they were with community school board districts. So we would have to literally start from scratch to rebuild any system. Would that be correct?
We have community superintendents since I've become chancellor, but the thing that I think is particularly meaningful is that they're instructional people. They do not have to play politics. They have to agree and they meet with elected officials, but they're able to select what I consider the right principles and focus on instructional priorities, rather than some of the things that I, as a former district superintendent, had to spend maybe more time on things that were more political rather than instructional. So I think that's what you need, an instructional system where everyone's focused on the kids and putting the kids first. And I think this system does it.
And no system is perfect, but not off the cuff today, but do you think that you could prepare a comparison list of how the New York City school system is doing today as far as the kind of indicators we all look at for improvements in our schools compared to under the old system?
I think the one thing I can say with certainty, because I've been around long enough, that there is more equity in this system. Felix, correct me if I'm wrong. I can tell you that when I was a superintendent, I assumed that District 15 was the model. I just assumed all districts ran like ours. We had a very reasonable school board. We had committed principals. I became a principal in District 2, some of the same models. And then when I became a regional superintendent, I was in charge of 4 districts. And one of the things I realized is that professional development in some places didn't exist, that principals were chosen for all kinds of reasons, sometimes other than the right person for the right job. So the students in these districts geographically may not all have been given the best advantages, the best instruction, the best teachers. And again, it's no one's fault, it's just, this is now about saying no matter where you live in New York City, all the superintendents go through the same training. I personally meet with all the superintendents once a month. All the PD is universal for all teachers. It's not teachers in District 2 or 15, which always had good PD, but it's teachers in District 7, and District 9, and District 12. The unanimity that we have. When we open our schools to each other, I expect teachers from the Bronx to visit schools in Staten Island. We have to learn from each other. It was 2 separate, 2 uniform. People that were happy were very, very happy. District 26, very happy. But we need to all be happy, and we need to say the best practices, the best principles are universal. And I think that is something that I can honestly say right now is true. That wasn't true in the past.
Thank you. There was discussion about middle school issues earlier, and you even described that people go into teaching and imagine being elementary teachers or high school teachers, but nobody really ever plans on being a middle school teacher. For the record, when I graduated high school, I went back to my middle school and apologized to the teachers for being so god-awful, because there is something about that age
They're
range.
wonderful. I love 7th graders, but it takes a certain person to
Clearly.
see them for what they are, which they're these little imperfect beings who need to express themselves, and you can't take it personally.
Right. So my curiosity, we have some K through 8 schools, some in my own district, District 2. I'm wondering what the evaluation is from your perspective of whether that helps in improving the sort of both the continuity for young people and the kind of education they're getting when you don't throw them all together by themselves in separate buildings.
I think it really depends, school by school. But just as a rule of thumb, it takes a certain number of students in the 6th, 7th, and 8th to create a good middle school culture, whether it's a K-8 or a standalone. And anything less than 300 something, you do not have the special programs that middle school kids have. And when there's a standalone middle school, but they have to be good, whether it's K-8, it has to be a good school with a good principal and good teachers, you have kids making more independent decisions. They are being maybe raised a little bit more sophisticated to go on to high school. So it's all about the preparation for high school, and I think that really depends on the school. Many of our standalone middle schools do a lot of work with high schools. They give high school courses, or they take visits to high schools. In the K-8, in some of the schools they do that too, but in others they're more babied or whatever. So I don't want to say, it depends on the schools. But I went to K-8 school. However, I see the merits in standalone middle schools. I do think that there's a lot to be said for the opportunities, the choices the kids can make, certainly after-school programs, the arts, and all other things. So pretty much individual decisions.
And finally, I applaud you for what you're doing to expand young people's opportunities to prepare for college and go to college. Particularly those students who may be first generation to even consider college in their family, perhaps new Americans where there's no one in the family who even has any kind of, experience to offer their own children when attempting to go to college. I urge you, when you're doing this work, because we see it as so broadly out there in New York City, we need to make sure these students are being encouraged, supported, directed into quality education post-high school. Too many of the proprietary schools are great at convincing young people to sign on the dotted line, use up their TAP, their Pell, any loan money they might have to join them in their quote-unquote educational institutions, and then completely fail to provide the actual education. Then the students find themselves having used up their money, potentially in debt for the rest of their lives, with no education. And I say that from experience, that it is the exact population that you want to help go to real colleges that gets sucked in so easily by the fake school. So I hope that you are building in that reality to what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's really one of the trainings that we're giving the guidance counselors at the high schools in terms of preparing kids for college. It's also why we need more mentorships and internships in the kinds at that level, so that if they have someone who's big. One of the things we're hoping is happening today in a lot of schools, as teachers talk about where they went to college and what they learned at college, that they can make that statement. But I'm certainly very cognizant of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe Senator Marcelino has one more follow-up question, or maybe more.
No, just one. Chancellor, you talked about suspensions, and I remember back when I was teaching, and we had a rule. I was the dean of students at the time. You couldn't be the dean of boys; you had to be the dean of students. Suspension was for 5 days max, and the principal was the only one who could suspend. I could recommend, the teacher could beg. They couldn't do anything about it. They would come to me. I would pull the kid out. We talked to the child. It was something really serious. We brought it to the principal, who would have to make the recommendation. But 5 days was max. You couldn't do for longer than that unless there was an arrest involved and something else took over. You were talking about 20 days or time like that. When did that arrive?
This is one of the reasons why we're redoing our suspension policy, because it was a little all over the place. So we're going to come out with new protocols on how many days you can do it for, and what is the infraction, and then it has to be aligned with the number of days, and also who you need to get permission from in order to do it, because there has to be a protocol in terms of, is it the principal? We have principal suspensions, now we have superintendent suspensions, but there has to be, again, when I'm talking about equity, it's not just about equity of teachers, it's equity about suspensions. There has to be a fairness around the city that your suspension is not dependent on the neighborhood you live in. So that's one of the things we're working on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate because the ability to come before you, because also now that I know that you're listening, I'm going to send you my requests in writing. Thank you. Thank you, my invoice.
Don't leave the cab. $11:30 a.m. United Federal Teachers UFT.
You don't need me at all.
New York State United Teachers. Cassie Pugh, Assistant Press. Andrew Pilata, Executive Vice President. And Christopher Black, Director of Legislation. Are you here? And Michael Mulgrew, President of UFT. Two people
You're
told
going
me
to
you
get
left.
that nicer.
They told me I did nice.
He did that already.
Oh, all right.
They told me you had left. You then went home, had dinner, and came back.
What are we here to talk about today?
Yeah, give me this. Right in the middle. I'll give it to you. You tell me when to go?
Yes, we are ready. Oh, folks, can we move it out? Nick?
Kathy?
Kathy, no one can help us out. No way. There's no water right there. There is candy. What's it? Cassie, can I have a little? Can I have a little bit of water? This is old water. I'll take it.
And seeing that point out we're 2 hours late. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Senator Young, Assemblyman Farrell, Chairs Marcelino and Nolan, members of the Assembly and Senate. I am Andy Pilata. I'm the Executive Vice President of NYSET, representing over 600,000 members from throughout New York State in K-12 education and higher education, healthcare, and our retirees. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today on the proposed 2016-17 budget. With me is Michael Mulgrew, President of the UFT, also Chris Black, the Political and Legislative Director of NYSET, and Cassie Prue, the Legislative Director of UFT. Public education, I feel, is going finally in the right direction, and moving that way, we would hope to continue to work together with the members of the Assembly and the Senate to ensure that every child in this state receives a great education. We must continue to reduce testing in this state and ensure that any remaining tests are solely diagnostic in nature. We must restore the joy of teaching and learning for our children and for our teachers. I will summarize my testimony. First, school aid. School aid, while the proposed school aid increase of $961 million is one of the largest we've seen in recent memory, we also have to point out that we have to significantly see much more going into this budget. This year in particular, we have a state support of schools that is crucial. The tax cap is near zero. Actually, it's a mere 0.12%, not even 2%. This devastatingly low tax cap will cripple local abilities to raise funds. Under a true 2% tax cap, $700 million would have been generated, which could have been used to offset what the state will have to make up for. A significant increase in school aid can be supported by the state. New York is no longer running a deficit and instead has a surplus of $5.4 billion, half of which is recurring revenue. New York public school students are still owed $4.4 billion in foundation aid and $434 million in GEA. An increase of $1.7 billion in school aid is needed just to keep things as they are, current levels of programs. NYSET is calling for an increase of $2.6 billion in general purpose school aid. This includes a $2.1 billion increase in formula aid and $500 million in targeted funding. The $2.1 billion in formula aid is needed to greatly increase foundation aid, eliminate the GEA, and fully fund expense-based aid. This $500 million in funding would go for support of struggling schools, for support of English language learners, expansion of pre-K programs, high-quality professional development, and for college and career pathways and CTE. We also request full payments of the $318 million in prior year aid claims that are owed to school districts. On the tax cap, we have said that it is very problematic. Living under this cap, most districts throughout this state are not able to restore cuts that have been made. The tax cap also hurt our poorest districts the most, placing severe limits on their ability to raise funds. To address this problem, we urge modifications to the current law, which would include changing the tax limit to 2% or CPI, whichever is greater, eliminating the supermajority requirement, eliminating the possibility of negative tax caps, and providing exemptions for increased enrollment, school security, BOCES capital expenses, and preventing pilots from negatively impacting tax levy limits. On community schools, we've heard a lot today about this model. We support and appreciate the proposed $100 million for community schools. for conversion from struggling and high-need schools, but obviously there is much more to be done. We would also ensure that community schools have the wraparound services that they need. We must work together to ensure that any action taken to support community schools conversion takes into account the unique needs of small and rural schools. Under the proposed formula, a high-needs rural school district could receive only $22,000, not enough for real change. Therefore, we request an additional $75 million be provided for struggling schools and other high-needs schools throughout the state. On receivership, we call for repeal of the receivership law and for supportive and collaborative community school models to replace this current punitive statute. The state has acknowledged concerns with the implementation of the new state standardized test, and just like the prohibition in the use of certain state tests and decisions for students and teachers, the state should provide the same delay for districts. The decision for districts to be placed on struggling schools list should not be even partly determined by student performance on invalid state tests or by test scores. Further, the $75 million previously allocated for struggling schools was released 6 months late, instead of the required July 1st, 2015. The funds were finally released only a couple of weeks ago. And the removal of dedicated teachers from their profession is a very harmful practice. Teachers in receivership schools often feel punished, and these educators have devoted their lives to the high-needs schools that they work in. We also should not attack collective bargaining in these schools. In fact, the high-needs receivership schools are owed more than $2.7 billion in foundation and GEA combined. Teacher centers, something close and dear to my heart. At a time when we are asking so much more of teachers and educators in the field, we must provide them with the tools that they need. The executive budget eliminates completely all funding for teacher centers. Funding for these centers is crucial, and we call on the legislature to restore funding to the 2008-9 levels of $40 million. On the Parental Choice in Education Act, we continue to oppose this, which creates a backdoor voucher program and constitutionally questionable tuition tax credit. The Education Scholarship and Program Tax Credit drives $70 million to corporations and the wealthy, who would receive a tax credit equal to 75% of their authorized contributions, up to an astounding credit of $1 million. The Family Choice Education Credit would also set aside another $70 million to provide $500 per student refundable personal income tax credit. We urge you to reject this. On charter schools, New York public schools are still struggling financially. Currently, 1/3 of these districts still receive less than they did in 2009-10. And nearly a combined total of $5 billion is still owed to these schools. Despite this, the budget increases for all charter schools and unfreezes per pupil aid for New York City schools. We do not support the continued increase in charter school tuition, especially without accountability. And you should consider the fact that companies that operate charter schools have hundreds of millions of dollars in reserve. Contrary to many reports, there is nothing in the budget proposal that strengthens accountability for charter schools to enroll and educate ELL students and students with disabilities. On career and tech ed, we must continue to support and expand access to CTE programs. Therefore, we fully support increasing the aidable salary for all CTE programs and increasing BOCES aid for special services aides. We urge the legislature to provide regular, predictable increases in the tuition rates of 4201, 4401, 853, and special act schools, and assist them in achieving parity with surrounding school districts. In conclusion, we look forward to partnering with the legislature to ensure that all of our students throughout this great state receive the best education that they can. And we know that the best investment we can make is in the future of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have submitted our testimony, and I'll try to make this quick because I know everyone's been working diligently today. I want to first thank the chairs, Assemblywoman Nolan, Senator Marcelino, Assemblyman Farrell, and Senator Young. Thank you very much for having this hearing today. And it's been a long, this is my 8th year, which I consider a long time at this point. And we've come a long way, and the last year has been quite contentious at certain times, but right now we're seeing a ray of light. But I am here to represent New York City first and foremost. And as I am so proud of hearing my Chancellor's presentation just before me, I also know that our level of need in New York City is continuing to grow. And when I say the level of need, I'm talking about the need of our students as well as the size of our school system. A lot recently has been written about homelessness in New York City. I can tell you right now that 84,000 children last year in New York City at some point were involved in temporary housing. And on average, every night of the school year, 28,000 children will be sleeping in a temporary housing facility. At the same time, our numbers and percentages of students with disabilities, as well as English language learners, are growing exponentially. These are responsibilities that we take on as the educators of the City of New York public school system. And we take that very seriously. But we also know that it does make a difference when it comes to funding, how to service these children. And we have made great strides over the last couple of years. I know the mayor was up here yesterday talking about our graduation rate. You heard from the chancellor today all of the different things and programs that we are implementing to deal with all of their children's needs in our city. But I also was up here a couple of times already this legislative session. I hear a lot about GEA, which is great. I believe every child should be funded what the state owes them, but I don't hear a lot about CFE. And the Contract for Excellence is something that we feel very strongly about. We want every child to be fully funded. We believe that the legislature should adhere to a settlement, a court settlement, and we are hoping that this is the year that this gets done, because we are moving in the right direction in New York City, but we still have a lot to do. We have a capital plan that needs to be pushed up even further. As we know, we still have children. Despite the gains we've made recently, we still have a lot of children inside of temporary school facilities, trailers. And right now, for the last 2 years, we are now at a 15-year high in our class size for pre-K through 3. We like the fact that we have pre-K for all, and we like the governor's proposal to do it across this entire state. But that also includes funding goes with that. So we are hoping at this point, we are very strong about our belief that the legislature should make sure that there is a real down payment this year on CFE, and it's not just the money amount. It is also the adherence of the plans that school districts have submitted with them to be followed. Class size is a major issue inside of New York City, as I am telling you. We're overcrowded, that's one issue, but even when we can reduce classes, we're not doing it. And if we receive this money, we want to make sure that it is going towards things that we know will make an educational difference. 1 year ago today, I sat before you and I was basically giving you a lot of research and facts about proposals that I was vehemently against. We right now are at a better place. We support the Governor's Commission and their recommendations, but that's going to require a lot of work. I do believe it is in our state's best interest to develop their own standards and develop standards by working with all of the stakeholders, with parents, with administrators, with teachers, and making sure that it's just not a basic set of standards, but we're also designing standards, and this has never been done before, making sure that we're supplying our school districts with standards for students with disabilities as well as English language learners. Because we cannot continue to leave those segments of our student population behind and leave the teachers to fend for themselves. So to do all of this work, we know that is going to require funding. If the Board of Regents has adopted an action plan to redesign all of the standards for New York State, come up with basic curriculums that match all of those standards, have a training regimen put into a calendar so that all school districts have the ability to train, unlike last time where we just said, here's the new standards, here's the new test, good luck. And we want to get it right this time. So I'm up here, and right now in New York City, we have 70 teachers who are volunteering after school and on weekends and are looking at those standards and taking that all apart. But we know that that work's not going to get done without funding. Teacher Center is an important piece. It's a very important piece to this budget, as well as designing an actual plan to get this work done for the entire state. New York City would be more than happy to share any of the work that we do with the rest of the state. That is my word to all of you. And when it also comes to Teacher Center, I want to get to the piece on the receivership that my colleague just spoke about. Receivership is a very difficult issue. New York City has an aggressive plan. We started a plan before the law was passed last year. We already started a plan to make changes. You have to have an educational support system, which is once again where Teacher Center comes in. We're doing community learning school work. But I cannot emphasize enough what my colleague just said. We all talk about this, and we call them renewal schools in New York City, not failing schools. And if we continue to use this as a focal point to attack the staffs of the school, I am telling you right now, the most difficult thing we have are attracting teachers to these schools because they're like, well, aren't those the schools they always write bad things about? If we want our best and brightest inside of these schools, we have to give them the supports. We have to give them the services. We make no excuses. We know, and we were very happy to see in the State of the State address that there is a recognition that poverty matters when it comes to education. We want those services. We need them to be targeted for our students' needs. But to continue and act like we can have this conversation here and say we need this, but at the same time saying we have to go after those failing schools, acting like that does not give us a problem at the level inside of the communities to try to get people to do this difficult work would be a little bit ingenuine. So I am asking that we do something to look at that law, talk about what these services are. We support the community learning school model. You know that I was up here 5 years ago talking to you about what we were doing in New York City, asking for funding. We run, the union in New York City runs 26 of its own. We are very proud of that model. We already have, we can PS 335 in Brooklyn. 4 years ago, everyone was looking at it. It was a horrible school on closure list. Now it's doing very well. It has its services. It has educational supports that meet it. We have a resource coordinator based in the building talking to the community as well as to the staff and making sure everything is being coordinated the right way. That is how you make community learning schools work. It should not be just the state throwing money at schools saying, boilerplate, here's these services, this is what you need. You need to engage the community in the process. That is the way to do it. So, and in terms of what I heard a lot already in the questions about school discipline, as a teacher, it always goes like this. First it was zero tolerance, now it's zero discipline. We can't play politics with this. This is tough work, okay? Zero tolerance sounded nice for a little while, a whole bunch of people got behind it, student suspensions went up, parents were outraged, it was not the right approach. The only way to truly do this work is what a school-based cultural approach. We are asking this year for a new program, a program we've been running for 2 years as a pilot in New York City, the union, just as I came to you 5 years ago with community learning schools. It's called the Positive Learning Community. We embed a behavior specialist, and with the schools, the 15 schools in New York City are now running this. We clearly have positive results. Suspensions are down. And the surveys about how people feel about the school are way up. It's not easy work. And you're always going to hear these debates, number of suspensions. Remember when No Child Left Behind came out? How did the school get in trouble if it reported incidents? So what happened? Nobody reported an incident. And then all of a sudden, nobody's having an incident because they don't want to be on a persistently dangerous list. It's time to get common sense into this discussion. If we want to make a difference at the school level in terms of discipline, it's not easy, but we have to have people there who are guiding the school through this process, and that's why we're asking for this. Career and technical education, for those of you who know me, and I like the support that I've heard about this all day, it is something that it has been moving in the right direction, but I believe New York State is on the precipice to take this to a place that no state has before. You heard the Chancellor talk about this. There are some impediments in current regulations, more about the licensing and certification of teachers, about how the system is slightly archaic when it comes to all of the new areas for career and technical education. We are absolutely in the business of making sure that we develop more of these programs. The business community works with us hand in hand on these, developing these, and it's a lot of, and I have to say, in terms of being an educator, it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to go to a CTE school and see what's going on, see the excitement, see the different things, and if you haven't been able to do that, just get in touch with me, and I'm sure myself or Assemblywoman Nolan has a couple of schools that we could bring you to rather quickly. Now, my topic, which we always have fun with every year, charter schools. I will start. I will never paint the charter schools with a broad brush. There are independent charters, there are charter chains. But in terms of any sort of legislative proposals that include anything with giving charter schools any more funding, I am vehemently against. I was here last year. One of the few things I did support was the idea of finally creating what was called then anti-creaming language. And the only thing that was created at the end of the legislative session was that the management's children, their families, now had preference over children from the district. This is absurd. You want to be a public school, take all kids and keep them. And in New York City, you compound that with the fact that we now have to supply space, valuable public school space, and when their attrition rates are high, go up every year, there are empty seats in their classes, yet our public school children are sitting in the same buildings completely overcrowded. It's time to stop the games. It's that simple. All children and keep all children. That's what we're asking for. And I can't make it any plainer than that. In terms of revenue, as I said last year, and I will say again this year, we still believe, we know that things we ask for cost money. We believe that we should look at closing all sorts of different tax loopholes that we have in our state. The hedge funds and the carried interest is something we brought to you many times before, as well as I do not believe that people who are not residents of our state should get all sorts of tax exemptions and tax preference on their residence. If you don't live here but you want to own property here, you shouldn't get the tax incentives that a resident should get. It's that simple to me. And I can't thank you all enough for all of the work that we have been able to do together over the past year, and I look forward to working with all of you this legislative session.